first signs that showed me my autistic son was getting better. Hello everyone, today I'm going to share with you this major change I've noticed in my son. The first big improvement came at the age of 9. To give a bit of context, my son was diagnosed with ASD, so autism, at the age of 3. He is now 9 years old. Over the course of 7 years, I tried everything that healthcare professionals recommended to me. And I had reached a point where I was almost resigned. That is to say, the only chance, the only thing I had, even though I am a very combative person in life, I had reached a point where I was almost resigned after 7 years of fighting, where I did ABA therapy, ABA, where I hired a full-time psychologist, where I really fought against it. This electrophysiological problem, or rather this neurological problem, whatever you want to call it, this behavioral problem, this neurodevelopmental problem. And the results were quite meager during those 7 years, but I was almost at a point of resignation. What changed everything in my case was the introduction of neuromodulation following the completion of a particularly precise electroencephalogram, which made it possible to identify major dysfunctions. The specialists I had seen were not aware of this. Of these checks, of these particularly thorough analyses that today science now allows us to carry out, particularly at the electrophysiological level, examinations of the brain, and to observe that there can sometimes be blockages at that level. But we are content to observe autistic symptoms such as impaired communication, lack of eye contact, developmental issues, an inability to make progress in development or to catch up on delays. Problems with concentration, issues with restricted interests, which are generally, if I may say so, the triad that allows health specialists to diagnose autism. This was the case for my son at the age of 3. So everything, let's say, was more or less resolved by the end of the summer of this year, 2025. Until October, when I started implementing intensive neuromodulation combined with an educator, specialized 7 hours a day. So neuromodulation makes it possible to open windows of plasticity in a particularly significant way, to unlock electrophysiological barriers that time and natural maturation could not resolve. And it was an incredibly thrilling and momentous occasion. Honestly, that's a massive understatement, to say the very least. To see that after just one single week of this non-invasive neuromodulation treatment, he had completely lost his auditory and tactile hypersensitivity completely disappeared. Eye contact doubled. His ability to concentrate changed completely. Today, my son is able to sit still. 1 hour, 2 hours with the educator, working intensely. His speed of analysis and calculation completely changed. The stereotypies, which were very significant, disappeared by about 80%. And even more importantly, a core feature of autism, restricted interest, completely disappeared after 1 to 2 months. So my son was diagnosed with autism. I will make all the documentation available to you later through an electroencephalogram, meetings with a neurologist, meetings with psychologists in different countries. And every time I always receive the same diagnosis. And today I'm not saying that my son is cured, far from it. He doesn't speak, not properly. He has sometimes stereotypies that come back, but much less frequently. He has, let's say, it's mainly the language barrier that prevents us from communicating with him, even though I can sense little by little that his desire to communicate is increasing, that contact is increasing, hugs are increasing. The child is becoming much more and awakened. I can say an ability to get closer, to give hugs. He comes to see me every morning for hugs. Physical contact has greatly improved. But we still have a language barrier as of the day I'm making this video, knowing that it's been 3 months since I started intensive neuromodulation. But we are seeing progress that is extremely significant from a clinical point of view, and that I can truly observe day by day. We also have periods of inactivity. We have a lot of laughter. We have a child who is extremely alert. And it's particularly striking that none of the healthcare specialists I have met recommended the path of neuromodulation to me. Maybe not to cure, but at least to significantly improve my child. So for the first time in 7 years, I finally have my son who is starting to make progress. So the real question we need to ask is whether your child has a structural problem in their brain, a structural autism. And even in those cases, the scientific literature today shows us that very significant improvements are possible, and even just for that reason. There is real value in performing neuromodulation for a child with neurodevelopmental disorders, but even more so for children with functional disorders, which psychologists do not differentiate. Today, whether you are a structural autistic, meaning with faulty brain wiring, not faulty, but atypical brain wiring, or whether you have a functional block, which happens when a child has been traumatized, when a child has been emotionally deprived in the early years of life, a child has experienced trauma, whatever it may be, at some point. This can cause, when these traumas have been repetitive, you can find literature on the subject, especially regarding BEIP children, which is currently one of the most significant areas in the literature that we have. On the subject of childhood trauma, emotional deprivation can generate autistic symptoms that are almost identical to those of true autism. Today, children who are developmentally delayed, children who have been traumatized and who display autistic symptoms are all classified under autism. We group together truly autistic children in the same category. But today, it is clear that a significant proportion of children diagnosed with autism have functional problems at the brain level. And the very good news about these functional problems is that neuromodulation can greatly improve them. It can lead to a very significant reversal, or even in some cases, a complete reversal. But there is always a very significant improvement. Today, the scientific literature reports improvements of 20 to 30% for children who are truly autistic. I encourage you to check and read the literature. I have included several references in the description of this video. But for children who have a real electrophysiological issue, it can be completely different, and we can see real breakthroughs in terms of how your autistic child functions. So I encourage you to explore this path, and I truly wish you the best possible improvement for your autistic child.